Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It is Geoff, Mosher, and Adam Caplan. And as promised, we're finishing off our series here looking at Eagles free agency. Last time we did some offensive players who could help fill holes for the Eagles. And now we're going to go through some defensive players who could help fill some holes for the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's already been exciting, Adam. You got Zach Baun re-signed, and that was really big. We did a podcast on that, and of course the extension for Saquon Barkley. And in these episodes, we're looking at areas where we expect the Eagles to most likely maybe need depth, perhaps a starter at certain positions. But getting Baun back is obviously huge for their defense, especially since you and I are both of the mindset that Josh Sweat and Milton Williams are more likely to walk than come back.
Yeah, it's to use your term, it went according to Hoyle so far. We expected Baun to be back. But what I'd said 2 shows ago, just as long as he was not asking for Roquan Smith's contract or demanding it, or it was like he was like, it's either this or nothing, which he didn't do.
Right.
Because that deal, not only was it $20 million a year, which is the highest paid in NFL history at inside backer, the structure is just so player friendly. I know, like Roquan Smith's his situation with Chicago, he was a young star, then he kind of fell off, got traded to Baltimore, did better late in his career with Chicago, but they didn't want to pay him what Baltimore wanted to, and then he did this amazing contract. It's a very player-friendly structure. First 2 years fully guaranteed at I think like around $22 million plus a year. Overall, it was $20 million it was actually a front-loaded contract, which is fascinating. Again, player-friendly. And it's essentially 3 years fully guaranteed. His structure, which I would think Baun would get because he got way less in fully guaranteed money at signing, $34 million. But that structure was so good that he had one of those advanced guarantees in year 2. If he was on the roster by the 5th day of free agency, his 3rd year would become fully guaranteed, which you avoid the funding role if you're an NFL team, but at signing you do for that extra year. But the bottom line is there's no way they were cutting him after year 1. So he got what he wanted. He got an amazing contract. And then we go to Zach Baun. Now, the reason why we said that Zach Baun was not going to get a contract like that is because he was an all-pro, a great player for 1 year. Had he done this for 2 years, hell yeah, you could ask for that because you've got leverage to do it. And every other, by the way, you would have probably had 10 to 12 teams in it for his services because he was so dominant. So everything's relative to years of service, how many years you've done it. His is spectacular. Bottom line, as we move forward here, they kept him. He wanted to be back, which is, we've talked about this for weeks. They wanted him back badly. He wanted to be back badly. Just one of these, a great guy, by the way. Everyone around him says he's just been a phenomenal guy. And I look back at his, I just want to learn more about him. This week, the combine he ran well in his 40. Not that the 40 should mean much to a he was an edge rusher then. His other times are just okay, but his lift was really good at 225. He was pretty solid in the upper half. But I talked to a coach who was on the field that day. You clearly could see him. You clearly could see that he was kind of undersized to be an edge rusher, 6'2" and a third. Under 240. That's more today's NFL linebacker than edge rusher. So that's why you could see maybe what Vic Fangio might have seen from a body type of movement.
Of course. Yeah, that tweener type of body where
there you go.
Sure where it fits. All right, stay plugged in, everybody, to Inside the Birds in the coming days and weeks as free agency is. We're on the doorstep of it. Starts, with the legal tampering period Monday, and things will come out very quickly. We'll have Andrew DeCecco continuing to do his DeCecco dailies on the podcast platform. We had a great Ask ITB live stream session last night, or I should say Thursday night on Patreon with our great Patreon members. We're going to continue to do those probably a little more frequent, definitely with more frequency in the coming days as free agency really kicks off. So that's patreon.com Inside the Birds. You need to become a member to get this great quality insider content that we're giving, bonus content, I should say. And then our shows with Greg Cosell will start fairly soon. We're going to do some free agency recap shows with Greg Cosell as he recaps the first and second waves of free agency on the Inside the Birds platform. And then he's also going to do Intel with Greg Cosell, NFL draft preview shows. That'll be coming up starting pretty soon. And then Ask Greg Cosell live streams are coming back to the Patreon platform. So a lot of great stuff that we've got on the platform now and coming up. And of course, our great contract series we're doing with our analytics expert, Sam Finkel, who's been doing contract predictions using a predictive model to figure out what players are going to make on the free agent market. A lot of that is already up on the platform. So in this episode, we're going to talk about Eagles defensive needs in free agency. We're going to go through defensive tackle, edge, corner, and inside linebacker. So Adam, we'll start with defensive tackle with the expectation of Milton Williams hitting the open market. We know the Eagles under contract have a lot of young guys. Jalen Carter, Moro Ojomo will enter year 3, I believe, next year already. Hard to believe.
This season coming up.
Yeah, the season coming up, 2025. Thomas Booker was a nice find. He's under contract. And then the guys Byron Young and Gabe Hall that they brought in last year. So you look at that and you think, wouldn't be, especially if you lose Milton, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And it's probably a necessity to bring in some kind of veteran interior defensive lineman, because I don't know, you can just hand the keys to Moro Ojomo and say, here, it's yours. You can let them compete, but they need some bodies there.
Yeah, so they're definitely short one. They'll definitely add one by training camp, if not 2, but certainly 1. Now, it doesn't have to be, though, as they proved last season. It doesn't have to be a veteran. It would behoove them to do it, but it doesn't necessarily mean to do it. It mean that they have to. So it is a buyer's market in free agency at D tackle. There are a ton of them, younger veterans or older veterans. Guys are clearly near the end. There are guys in the middle of their career. Now, there's a reason why some are in market. Some have been cut already. We'll get to that. There's one in particular who's got a couple interesting tie-ins with some of the Eagles coaches. I know you and I talked about this off the air. We'll get to that in a minute. They're former first-round picks who never have quite made it due to injury. The guys who have played good football, but then they kind of petered out, and they just move on. The guys have had injuries. So, yeah, I mean, we're not going to go over – there's like 50 players. Actually, I'm sorry, 40. Actually, 40 worthwhile guys signing.
Yeah, I like that you say worthwhile. Some of these guys – I mean, these guys aren't like all pros and game changers, but they're certainly guys who can play 2 downs in the NFL and really help you out. A lot of them.
Yeah, they're mostly – well, actually, they're a variety. They're 43 interior guys. They're 34 34 front players. They're nose tackles. They're not a lot of noses. They're just they're guys who are really good fits for 34, like Draymond Jones, who we're going to get into in depth here. In fact, by the time you hear this, he might sign with another team. Who knows? But that one was fascinating because it never worked from day one there. He was great with Denver. We'll get to him in a second, but there are guys like Javon Kinlaw, who was a first rounder for the Niners. He had a very bad knee injury. He never became the player they thought he should be. He's got great length. You go down the list. There's guys like Jaron Reed, who's a proven pass rusher, but that's really what he is. He's in the twilight of his career. It's just, again, they're guys who started off great early in their career. T.R. Tart, who hails from Philly, it was a great find by John Robinson, the former general manager of the Titans, though he's kind of bounced around a little bit, looking to revive his career. There's Levi Onwuzurike, who had a bad injury early in his career with Detroit, where there were questions whether he'd play again. He's a free agent. He's got talent. They're guys like they're 2-down guys like you're talking about. Foley Fatukasi, who's strictly a run stopper. They're all different body types and length and points of career with these guys. It's just, again, it's strictly a buyer's market. Now, if you want, let's get to Draymond Jones. If you want, he's the guy right now to me. I know it just never worked in Seattle. It's just funny how his 2 main coaches were 2 of his guys in his career were Vic Fangio, who was his head coach in Denver for a bit, and his D coordinator for a short period in Seattle was Clint Hurt.
Yep.
Wouldn't you know it? They're both in Philly now. Yeah,
a lot of familiarity there. I think he makes a lot of sense. When I poked around on him, people feel like his best position is a 3 technique, which is what Milton Williams played. And as you have mentioned, he's kind of been from Denver to Seattle, moved around a little bit on the D line. And I do wonder if just putting him in a spot like you're our 3 technique, and that's where we're going to keep you there, is better for his career. He made some pretty decent money in Seattle, Adam. So
Great
the
money.
question is, is he looking for a short-term deal to have a really nice year with a good plan? Somebody has a good plan for him so he can try to make another big contract after it? Or is he, I've made my money, I now just want to win, I'm willing to sign for maybe 2, 3 somewhere else, because he's only 27 years old.
Wow. He actually just turned 28. Just turned 28.
He was 27 during the season, just turned 20. Still,
yeah.
28, 29, 30. You got 3 years you can get out of it.
Yep. And he doesn't have really an injury history to speak of. He made $35 million in his 2 years with Seattle. And here's what happened. We were told that because they've run a 43 front, but with the looks more like a 34. Anyway, they try to stand him up. It didn't work. He's a hand in the dirt player. He's an interior defensive lineman. It seemed like everything they tried didn't work. He was phenomenal with Denver. He was a guy we talked about with Greg Cosell 2 years ago doing his show. Greg told us how much he liked Dre. It's strictly by tape.
Yep. And
based on the tape, you knew he was going to get paid. He did. Over $17 million. His average per season was 17.2. His APY was. The guaranteed signing was monstrous. So yeah, it just didn't work. They saw it. Seattle cut over 55 million in cash they saved this week and just cutting veterans. They cut like 5 veterans so far. They may not even be done, but he is one of them. He is the guy. If you want an interior pass rusher who still's got a lot left in the tank, from what we were told, it didn't look like he lost all that much. It was just he was misused in the wrong system. They couldn't figure it out with him, and this happens sometimes. It's free agency sometimes is they call it a crapshoot. You think you know what you're getting, and you try something, it doesn't work.
I mean, he did have 7 tackles for a loss and 13 quarterback hits. The 13 were the most of his career. So even not used correctly, he had production. 4 sacks is all right. It's probably not, his production's probably not that different than what Milton Williams gave the Eagles if you're just looking at kind of raw data. So I think he would be a pretty good guy to slide in there if you lose Milton Williams. And like you said, he had his best years under Vic Fangio and Clint Hurt. So it just makes too much sense. Just have to see what the market, there might be 10 or 11 teams that are also thinking the same thing that play a similar front.
So Javon Kinlaw, who was with the Jets last season, was a former first rounder
for the 49ers.
Yeah. And he's got great length. Like he's got a lot of ability. He just has never been able to get there due to injury. He's an interesting player. You can move him a little bit depending on what kind of front you have. So he's an intriguing player. The great Calais Campbell, who I would, for my money, I don't vote for the Hall of Fame, but I would vote for him to be a Hall of Famer due to longevity. Just a really good player.
Oh, you're into the compilers, huh? No.
Yeah, I know. We're not talking about Mercedes Lewis here, but yeah, who I saw the Senior Bowl in mid 2000s. He's still because he can block. It's funny. He was the first round pick who could catch, and then became a blocker. But no, but Calais is obviously he's a 4th D tackle. I mentioned Jaron Reed, who's a pass rusher. Really, that's what he does. That's why he keeps getting contracts. He can rush the passer.
He's a good player.
Yep, proven player. B.J. Hill, formerly of the Giants and Bengals, his contract's up. I mentioned T.R. Tart earlier.
Yep.
Maurice Hurst, who has had some good moments. Talked to the coaches who've worked with him. Former the 49ers and Raiders and now the Browns. He's out there. I mentioned Anzaruki. T.J. Slayton of the Packers, Eagles know he's a nose tackle. But Jerry Tillery's out there. He's got some explosiveness in his body, former first-round pick. There are a lot of guys out here. It's a buyer's market. The Eagles have no problem finding somebody.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Nottie is a good player. It's funny, Contavious Street, old Eagles friend.
Yeah, he's still there. That's right.
He's still there. And when he was with the Eagles, he gave you some bursts, some snaps until they traded him because they were deep there. But gosh, yeah, all these names. I mean, I really like the 2 kids. Kids, I'm not sure their ages, but Onwuzurike from Detroit. Wasn't he with the Eagles at one point? Like as a camp guy? No, maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. But
no, Levi was drafted by the Lions.
Oh, well, okay. All right. And Slayton from Green Bay, I liked his tape because I watched a lot of it when they were preparing for the Eagles. So, yeah, you go pretty deep here. And if you don't, if you're not in on the Draymond Jones, there's certainly guys to get. And by the way, Kinlaw and Hurst are former 49ers, and you know that the Eagles have been stockpiling former 49ers. Just look all up.
I know.
So
Crazy, man. I don't get it. There's something weird. I don't know. But hey, look, they've had some success. So again, it's a buyer's market, all shapes and sizes, whatever youth, older guys, whatever you kind of want, and they don't have to. Remember, folks, and we have to say this every year. We have to tell ourselves this too. The season doesn't start till September. You don't worry about if they're a little light at a position. It's not like they don't know this.
Right.
So they've got to early September to figure it out.
All right, let's move on to the edge position. Josh Sweat potentially lost in free agency. We've talked about the youth that they have that they're ready to play even more, and that's Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. Bryce Huff, they have to figure out their situation with him. The two guys that they have at the bottom of the roster, O'Shawn Mathis and KJ Henry, are bodies right now. So this is certainly an area where they can add a veteran, somebody to come in to compete. I think they want to see Smith and Hunt grab those starting spots.
Well, Smith is starting. There's no debate.
Yeah, Smith absolutely.
A lock. He's absolutely starting based on what he played. But you're right on Jalix Hunt. This is the challenge with Jalix Hunt because he came on so well. I know you and I and Greg were talking about it some weeks ago. And this is a scouting term, but it's actually a very big positive. He leaves you wanting more because the tape was so good to end the season. You're like, wow. Is he ready to? Is it too soon? Do you think it's too soon to say he should be starting?
That's a good point. It almost doesn't matter because I think you want to have 4 guys. You want to have a rotation of 4 and let that work out. They survived with 3 on their playoff run in Super Bowl, although Brandon Graham did come back. And how about him? Derek Gunn reporting that he tore his triceps again in the Super Bowl. So hard to see him coming back again, or maybe later in the year. But as we sit here right now, you really got 2 with Smith and Hunt, and that's why you'd expect the Eagles to take a look here on teams in free agency of the guys. So let's go through some of the names. There's some interesting ones.
Well, Joey Bosa, he's had a number of injuries in his career, and his cap number was high. His cash number was too high for the Chargers. He'll have good interest out there because he's a guy who can still play. Now, he does turn 30 in July, and he's clearly in the twilight of his career.
Yeah.
But the guy could still rush the passer. Saw Reddick's out there. Chase Young, who had a good 1 year. He's had a number of injuries in his career. He's a guy, if you're looking for a depth rotation, I'm sure he's going to want to go somewhere to start. See, that's the thing. That's why I brought up Jalix Hunt. We know that he was not supposed to play last year. He was going to be their 5th edge. He didn't play week 1 because there was no role for him. Mm-hmm. And then, all of a sudden, because of injuries to Huff and disappointment with Huff, the way he played, and BG's injury, he had to play. But that's the thing. To me, the guy you bring in, if you and I were on the show, I don't know that I want to bring in. I'm not bringing anyone high-priced. 1. Number 2, unless obviously it was Myles Garrett, someday, somewhere down the line, if there was a way to bring him in. But let's put that to the side. That's to pipe dream right now. Let's just stick with reality. Mm-hmm. Jalix Hunt showed me so much. What you're saying, I'd like to get him in a rotation with somebody else where, hey, if Jalix wins the job, he's the guy, and that guy's just going to have to accept it. Whereas, if you're Chase Young's is kind of, he's a young guy. He turns just 26 in April. I know, again, he's had injuries. Did a nice job last season. Is he willing to accept if he got beaten out here? Again, I'm not saying the Eagles were signing him. I'm just giving you an example of a younger guy who looks like he can make it to market. Are you willing to sign a guy who might speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, I need more playing time, who could cause an issue? Mm-hmm. Because I get it. If you're signing a 1-year deal here, you want to play if you feel like you've won the job. So these are just the kind of things that come up. But we'll see. Chase Young's an interesting guy. Stayed relatively healthy last season. Now, there are a lot of older guys like Khalil Mack, who's in the twilight of his career. DeMarcus Tank Lawrence in the twilight of his career had a ton of injuries. Yep. Then there are guys, the disappointing former first-round picks. When I say disappointing, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka flashed, but he didn't get the extension because yet. I mean, they have till Wednesday. Yeah. But he's a guy who hasn't quite gotten there yet. He's hasn't been the guy that they thought he could be. He's flashed.
If you told me 4 years ago that in 4 years he'd be unsigned or, not agreed to an extension, I would have been shocked because the way his career started with Tampa Bay, I think he was a rookie when they won the Super Bowl, first or a second year player. I was, I thought for sure he was going to be a cornerstone for them, but you're right. It never really materialized the way you thought.
Yeah. And those kind of things happen sometimes. You see what you like on tape. A lot of people around the league liked him. He wasn't bad. He just didn't quite get there. That's why he didn't get the extension. And there's the kid. Is it Hector Hoyt? I can't remember. I never could get it right.
Hoyt.
Hoyt. Okay, Michael Hoyt.
Rams. Yeah.
Yeah. He went to Brown, didn't he?
Was it? Yeah, it was somewhere small. I remember that. Greg Cosell.
Yeah, it was definitely Ivy League. I'll look it up. I'm fairly sure it's Brown. He's a really good player. He's another guy that kind of came out of nowhere, and he could play hand in the dirt. He could play standing up. Yeah, he went to Brown. Yeah, he's a really good football player. 27 years old from Canada, by the way. That to me would be out of the price range. That would be a little bit high for me. Then they're hand in the dirt. Charles Omena, who's got good length. Yeah. Then a guy I'm going to bring up. He basically didn't play for the Chiefs. The Chiefs gave up maybe like a 6th-round pick for him. Josh Uche, formerly of the Patriots. Now he's a guy, by the way, he'd be a good guy to bring in because look, he got humbled a little bit. He didn't really play. He just needs a chance. And you know what? It's a guy who could compete for a job. And then their guys are kind of near the end of the career,
Yeah. I kind of like Dante Fowler, just because Fowler's been playing more, been a little more productive. Marcus Davenport's a guy who's had a lot of injuries. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a bad sign.
Matthew Judon. See, when you bring up Uche, I think, well, why not go with the more proven version? I know he struggled with the Falcons, the whole Falcons team, but Judon's got a reputation for being a pretty good edge rusher.
He was, yes,
at one point, yeah. Yeah, I definitely get Chris Long vibes, by the way, out of Khalil Mack and DeMarcus Lawrence, like guys who are in the twilight of their career, but might just have enough juice left in a rotation. Like Chris Long came to the Eagles and had just enough juice left in the twilight of his career to give you some pretty good production. I just don't know if you want Lawrence because he's a former Cowboy, and that's just never worked out for the Eagles.
Yeah, well, he's also had a number of foot injuries. Now, Matthew Judon was for many years with the Ravens. And some with the Patriots, certainly was one of the premier pass rushers, but he turns 33 in August.
Yeah, it is up there.
Yeah, and he looks like he had a slide last season. So just a couple more here of guys who would be interesting if you're just talking about pure edge. Because remember, you need guys who could stand up as pass rushers. You mentioned Dante Fowler, that's a good one. Who went with who Dan Quinn wanted with him in Washington. He knew the player. Darrell Taylor, who's a former 2nd-round pick for the Seahawks who never quite made it. Preston Smith, who's near the end of his career, who the Steelers cut. He was making too much money. Yeah. And there are guys in the mid-lower of the career who are explosive. Tyus Bowser, who had a bad knee injury a couple years ago, he showed he was healthy with Miami. He's out there. Joe Asai is a decent backup edge rusher for the Bengals, who had a knee injury a couple years ago. I'm just looking at guys who could stand up. You know what? This guy was interesting. He came out of nowhere 2 years ago for the Raiders. Now, I don't think he played last season due to knee injury. Malcolm Kuntz, who came out of nowhere.
Yep.
Who's a good player.
Remember him.
So, again, it's somewhat of a buyer's market out there.
Shaq Barrett, 32. But I don't know. I don't know what kind of juice he has left. He's an intriguing guy because he can play in a multiple front defense. You're not asking him to play the entire game. He only played one game last year for Tampa, right? Because he wasn't with anybody until he signed. So you can almost make the argument that he doesn't have the mileage of a guy 32 because he didn't play all last year. So, and then in 2022, he only played 8 games. So maybe the body still feels good. I know he's been through a lot with the family.
Yes.
He intrigues me.
He does. Here's one more for you before we move on. Is Chasen, the former 1st-round pick for the Jaguars.
Yeah.
But he did a good job with the Raiders. Like he did very well. He showed he can play in this league. He had always been a disappointment.
Yep.
But he actually did a good job. And he's young. He turns 26 in July. That's another guy. Again, I think we all agree that we're so intrigued with Jalen Hunt to give him a chance to be the guy who plays more snaps than the other guys competing against him. We just gave you a bunch of names. Some might be off limits, like Hoyt, because it's probably going to be too much money. But there are plenty of guys there for the Eagles to take a look at.
Yeah, Chasen's an interesting name because he's young, former first-round pick who did have some success there with the Raiders. I can see maybe a team trying to, outsmart everybody else or thinking they are and trying to get him. So we'll see. All right, let's move to the point is that there's plenty of options there. You just got to find the right guy that fits your scheme. Inside linebacker, we know Zach Bond now has the big deal. Nakobe Dean will be coming back from the injury. They like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. As a second-year player. We'll see what their plans are for him. Ben Van Sumeren coming back from the injury as an exclusive rights free agent. They have Dallas Gant, bottom of the roster guy. So the big name, well, for the Eagles, do they prioritize? Do they think they can bring Oren Burks back? You would like to see it because he played well when he was asked to. He knows the scheme now. Great leader, good locker room guy. Makes sense to bring him back. But it's another would you call it again a buyer's market with all the names that are out there?
I would say yes. There are guys who are going to be expensive who will not be coming here, like Nick Bolton.
Yeah.
Guy who's really talented. It's just going to be, I would think, would be too much, is Derek Barnes of the Lions. But there are guys, mid-level free agents.
A lot of old guys.
Yeah, there are. Yeah. Bobby Wagner, who I believe the Washington would like to have back. Devontae David, no, but Eric Kendricks. But they're mid-level guys who or older guys who you could bring in because they have to sign one more guy by training camp. They don't have enough bodies right now.
Yep.
Robert Spillane is a very underrated player who would definitely fit in the scheme, formerly of the Steelers and the Raiders. And I'm talking to Raiders people; they always liked him. Justin Strnad, who's a sort of an underrated inside backer, not a bad player, won't cost you a lot. Cody Barton's been around a long time. Shaq Thompson, the Panthers are not bringing back. He took a pay cut. He's been hurt a lot. Good player though. Tyrell Dotson has had some good moments with Buffalo. I mean, Malik Harrison is very underrated, but that could cost some money. You don't need to spend money because Bond is getting it. They're not going to pay two guys market. They're not doing that. That's not what they do. Not only is it not what they do, the Bond is a special circumstance because he was an All-Pro. Where the Eagles felt compelled to bring him back because you have to.
Yeah,
you can do it, and they did it. But yeah, you're right. The list is deep. Kaiser White is out there, by the way. Zach Cunningham, who was with Denver, most people didn't even know that. Landon Roberts is a good two-down player.
That name jumped out to me, Adam. I thought that maybe that's a guy that I could see coming in here on a short-term deal and getting some playing time if need be. Good backup to have. But when you go through these names, and if you're the Eagles, you think I have what I need in Oren Burks. Can I make this work? Because it just makes more sense than some of the names that are out there.
Yeah, he did a great job. Boy, I think the first game he played, because Greg just goes by what he sees, and he said that he looked like he looked. Maybe it's just because he hadn't played or started a game yet, but his first start was not great, and he looked like he might have lost a step. Then after a couple really good games, we asked Greg again. He goes, "Oh no, he's fine." He goes, "He got it down what he needed to do. He looked like normal. He looked really good." Greg's always liked him.
Yep.
You're going back to Vanderbilt, and he's got ideal length. Wow, does he? I think he's actually taller, if I'm not mistaken, than Bond. By the way,
I think he is. Yeah,
he might be 6'3" plus. So yeah, it's a buyer's market. And boy, I'll be interested to see if they give Trotter a chance to start because of Dean's injury. Dean, there's like no way he'll be ready by week 1. That's a pipe dream right now.
Right.
The hope is just that he can play next season. That patella tendon injury, you're always worried about that. But I'd be interested to see. We'll see. We'll learn more in OTAs, obviously, because they'll have somebody else there, whether he could be for starting job or not.
All right, you want to go on to cornerback now?
Do it. Yep.
All right. Well, we know that the team is intending to will part ways with Darius Slay. Chance he comes back. We'll see what happens there. Bradbury also. Isaiah Rodgers becomes a free agent. And then in the nickel spot, Avonte Maddox, his contract expires as well. So that leaves the Eagles with Quinyon Mitchell, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks on the outside. Of course, Cooper DeJean at the nickel. And at the bottom of the roster, they have A.J. Woods and Parry Nickerson. Son of Hardy, right?
Oh, is he?
Related to Hardy?
I'm not sure. I'll look it up. Hardy was a big-time middle linebacker.
Oh, yeah, for the Bucks, was it?
Yeah, for the Bucks and Packers. Yeah, he was phenomenal. Actually, I think it was really for the Bucks. But, yeah, he I'll look that up. No, is not his dad.
I just totally, thought made a connection there. Okay.
Yeah. So Vic knows him because he had him in Miami. He's really a nickel. AJ Woods is a younger guy who's also a nickel. So the Eagles need a starting outside corner.
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Rodgers, as we understand, would like to be a starter. Now, I'd be surprised if he found a starting job. Well, let's put it this way: at least if he could find where he could compete for one, I'm sure that would make him happy. But if he can't, he did a good job in his role with the Eagles, but they got to get somebody else. And right now, the guys out there would be cost effective, potentially, would be Charvarius Ward. He's a good player, formerly of the Niners, and another Niner, and Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
Carlton Davis, what worried me last year, and he got hurt, the fact that the Bucks traded him in conference to a rival, like the Lions, you have to question that, right? You have to question that.
Yeah. Didn't he also have trouble staying healthy?
He got hurt again. Yes, he did.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Good player, though. He was their best corner for the Bucks for a number of years.
Yeah.
Asante Samuel Jr. Here's the mid-level guys, folks. We told you last show. It's the ton of mid-level guys. Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, Kendall Fuller, who's he's late 20s. He could still play. Some teams might think the Dolphins released him. He's making a lot of money. Dante Jackson, mid-level. Eric Stokes never really made it as a former first-round pick for the Packers. Old friend Rasul Douglas. Poor Emmanuel Mosley. He retore his ACL last season. Paulson Adebo is an interesting guy who's out there he's a young guy who probably costs some money. Benjamin St. Juste has got great size. He got benched by the Commanders last season, which is interesting. Again, it's a buyer's market. There are a lot of guys out there. The thing is, the Eagles don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money at corner. The top guy is DJ Reed. That'll cost.
Yeah.
The two top guys are Byron Murphy, I should say, and DJ Reed. Now, one of my favorite guys for free agency, because he disproved that he couldn't play on the outside. He was forced to play on the outside 2 years ago for the Raiders. He did a good job. That's Nate Hobbs.
Mm-hmm.
Who was a nickel for them early. Then they moved him outside because they didn't have bodies. He did a good job. He's very competitive and physical. Now, he's had some injuries, so he wouldn't have a lot of leverage. The top nickels out there are Mike Hilton, who can blitz. He's a really good football player. Jordan Lewis, who the Eagles know. Jonathan Jones, who's well up in his career. And Noah Igbohagany was a former first-round pick for the Dolphins, who was severely overdrafted.
Yeah.
He played nickel this past season. He did play nickel. He played inside. I'm surprised. Greg told us that despite what everyone thought, and I know talking to Washington, they thought Sainrister would be their inside corner, or nickel, as Vic would say. He wound up playing more outside, and Igbohagany played a lot of more inside than expected. So he's out there. I mean, he's kind of revived his career, and the guys the Eagles know, like Dory Jackson, who they were in on a couple years ago. Akilla Witherspoon, the well-traveled Akilla Witherspoon, playing a lot of playoff games. He's also out there. The Rams have indicated they like to have him back, though.
Yeah. Yeah, he's actually not bad. I love his length.
Yep.
But, Paulson Adebo sticks out to me.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been a pretty decent corner for the Saints. Man, this is not a great – I mean, Rasul Douglas has actually played decently and adequately since leaving.
It's his own corner. Yep.
Yeah, and that's what the Eagles primarily play, zone. Yep. So they may actually have the structure to have him back better now than before.
Yep.
I don't know if they want to do this, but Gilmore has certainly held his own as he's gotten older. He was just part of the Vikings defense, and the Vikings were a pretty good defense this year, a very good defense. Man, I don't know. The problem, Adam, that I see is that the second level corners, the guys like Ward and Davis and Samuel Fulton, they still wind up getting overpaid in free agency. They don't make the blockbuster money that the first level corners make, but it depends on how much the Eagles want to spend here for a player who, may or may not be replaced by a draft pick.
Well, one thing I want to add on Stephon Gilmore. I need to correct something. Gilmore was the oldest starting corner, in deference to Darius Slay. My mistake. Gilmore is about 9 months older than Slay. He turns 35. Gilly Lock. He turns 35 in September, and Slay just turned 34 in January. So, and Gilmore did a good job. He could still play. You're obviously looking like a 1-year deal. He still played. He still did a good job. He is definitely making the Hall of Fame, by the way. If he doesn't make it someday, that would be
sure. I think he was Defensive Player of the Year 1 year with the Patriots. I mean, he was really good.
Yeah, but he's more of the only thing is he's more of a man guy. That's why Buffalo moved on from him some years ago, because and he went. This is when New England was playing more man than most teams.
Yeah,
and he excelled in it. He was phenomenal with the Patriots.
But I did see that the Vikings blitzed a lot, but they played more zone behind their blitzes last year than man because he was a little older. So he may be more suited for the sort of zone/man responsibilities that you see in a Vic Fangio defense. You have to play man on the outside until you deliver the running back, or I'm sorry, the receiver to a different player. And if it's an out route or a fly, you really are, for a lot of times, for at least the first 10, until you pass it off, you're in man coverage on slants and comebacks and hooks. So I don't know. It's like if your choice is between bringing back Slay and signing Gilmore to a 1-year deal, both in 1 year, and Gilmore's less money, you may want Gilmore.
I would bring. Well, let's put it this way. I mean, the Eagles will exhaust all of their avenues: free agency, trade, if there's anything that pops up, and then the draft. So they don't have to act now. Next week they could wait, but at least with Slay, he could still play.
Yeah,
that's not in question. But you always worry, as we talked about James Bradbury, you never know when a guy's going to lose it. This explosiveness of his legs, because that's why it's dangerous when you're trying to bring back somebody at a position where they have to move like that, whether it's receiver, corner, your tight end, running back. You worry about it. And you mentioned on the previous show about Slay had these little knee injuries, little minor things. You worry about that. The body breaking down. You can't have that. So it's somewhat of a buyer's market in free agency, but there are enough. The good. Yes, it definitely is. But it's one of those lists where you look, okay, I see this guy's older. This guy's had injuries. You kind of see why these guys are out there. Then there are a couple guys who might make it just because of the problems that the Saints are really they're really the only NFL team that continually has major cap problems, just because they're super credit card spenders. They refuse to cut players and they absolutely have to. But that sometimes you just can't, because they're stuck. Some guys make it to market sometimes, like Paulson Debo. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, the fun begins on Monday. That is the start of the legal tampering period, and we all know those first 3 days. It's like a carnival, man. Names coming off left and right, contracts, signings, and all that. We will continue to have it all covered on Inside the Birds. That's going to do it and wrap up our series here, looking at both the defense and the offensive free agency options that are out there. For Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks again for flying with us inside the Birds.